Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and today we once again actually have to talk about Google. Not that I wanted to do back to back, but here we are. The police are using Google to find suspects, and that's apparently violating the privacy of millions of US citizens, not to mention wherever it is around the world as well, but we are talking in this case about US law. Now, this is coming from NBC News, and here's what's going on. A teen was charged with setting a fire that killed 5 members of a Senegalese immigrant family in Denver, Colorado, and this defendant has become the first person to challenge the police's use of Google search histories to find somebody that may have committed a crime. Now, the pushback against this surveillance tool, basically known as a reverse keyword search, is being closely watched by privacy advocates, not to mention now abortion rights advocates as well, because everybody is concerned that this could be used to do things like investigate women who search for information about obtaining an abortion in states where the procedure is now illegal. This is changing the landscape around essentially the entire nation, and it's something that we have to talk about. Now, in documents that were filed last Thursday in Denver's district court, lawyers for the then 17-year-old argued that the police violated his constitutional rights when they got a judge to order Google to check essentially its massive database of internet searches for users who typed in the specific address of that home before it was set ablaze on August 5th of 2020. 3 adults and 2 children tragically died in that fire. Now, that search of Google's records helped basically investigators to find, or rather it pointed to this teen and 2 of his friends who were eventually charged in that fire, according to police records. All of them at the time were juveniles, and at the time, basically 2 of them, including the 17-year-old, were then being tried as adults. Obviously, they now are adults according to the law. They all have pleaded not guilty. The defendant, basically in juvenile court, has not yet entered a plea. Now, the 17-year-old's lawyer says that the search and all evidence that came from it should be thrown out because it amounted to a blind fishing expedition through Google's billions of users' queries based on a hunch that the killer may have typed in the address into Google search or the search bar. Now, that, according to their lawyers, violated the 4th Amendment, which protects against unreasonable searches. Now, according to Michael Price, who is the lead litigator of the National Association Criminal Defense Lawyers 4th Amendment Center and one of the 17-year-old's attorneys, he said, and I quote, "People have a private interest in their internet search history, which is really an archive of your personal expression. Search engines like Google are a gateway to a vast trove of information online for the way most people find what they are looking for. Every one of these queries reveals something deeply private about a person, things they might not share with their friends, family, or clergy." We've all typed in things to Google that we probably wouldn't want to have public, but Google, obviously under a judge's order, is giving it over to law enforcement, even if we're not caught up in a crime. Now, keyword searches have grown, increasingly common in the past few years as police have used them to search for suspects in a variety of crimes, including a string of Texas bombings, a sexual abuse case in Wisconsin, fraud in Minnesota, and on and on and on. They differ from traditional search warrants in that police seek them without knowing the name of the suspect. Instead, they are seeking information that might lead them to the suspect. I've done videos and podcasts on essentially this with geofence warrants that, hit Google constantly, meaning a crime was committed, let's say, down the street, and now essentially the police are saying, show me every single cell phone, within a 1-mile radius of the crime scene, if you will. And now my information, my cell phone, my identity is being caught up in that, as a potential suspect. And as there would be, let's say, thousands of people, if it was a 1-mile radius from, let's say, down my street. This is what we're talking about. It's phishing in the sense that they don't have anything to tie me specifically to it. I just happen to be in the area. It's just in the same way if I type in an address, maybe I've mistyped it, maybe I meant to type it in for another reason. Now Google is basically saying, oh, hey, Nick typed in this address too, so now am I potentially a suspect? That's what we are talking about here. Now Google, interestingly enough, does not publish data on the number of keyword searches requests that it receives and did not respond to a request to provide that information. Google also did not respond to requests for comment. And on another side, I literally just talked about this again, that Google was actually changing some of their privacy settings in the wake of Roe v. Wade and claimed they were the most transparent, that they were essentially showing the world what kind of warrants, what kind of orders they were getting. And right here, we've got NBC News saying Google does not publish data on the number of keyword search requests it receives and did not respond to a request to provide that information. So much for your transparency that you claimed in your own blog post, Google. We are watching. Now, that same Supreme Court has basically overturned Roe v. Wade. Privacy advocate, or I should say, now that the Supreme Court has overturned Roe v. Wade, it shifts for privacy advocates and women's rights groups because now they're worried about key searches that could essentially expand into investigation of what could be tantamount to an illegal abortion. Some states are looking essentially at making it a crime to travel out of state to have that procedure, and if that is the case, we may see requests basically going to Google. Google basically in their statement said, well, we're going to tell the world we have transparency. And I once again quote NBC News, Google does not publish data on the number of keyword search requests it receives and did not respond to a request to provide that information. What that means is if, let's say, a woman decides, hey, I've got to travel from, I'm going to travel to California because that's, one of those quote unquote safe states for that. Now she's looking up that kind of information in California, and here we are. So that obviously is a huge problem. Now, Jennifer Lynch, who is a surveillance litigation director at the Electronic Frontier Foundation, said, and I quote, police officers are going to try to investigate people they think are violating those laws. One way of finding that is to ask Google to hand over information on everyone who has searched for a Planned Parenthood in a particular place. If Google is allowed or required to turn over information in this Colorado case, there is nothing to stop a court case in a state that has outlawed abortion to also require Google to turn over information about that keyword search. And that is exactly what we are talking about here. If the legal precedent has been set that basically says law enforcement can request this, through the signature of a judge, then in a state where it is specifically illegal, under no longer having Roe v. Wade, now we've got a problem. Meaning the woman that is searching for that has a problem. So I think this is something that we really have to understand. I am not a fan of these fishing expeditions, these blanket warrants that basically say, show me everybody in the vicinity, with a cell phone of that crime scene, or, show me everybody that specifically searched, for these specific things, because quite frankly, I could be searching for the exact same thing as a criminal, and there you go. What if I search, for the address of a movie theater I want to go to and decide not to go to it the last minute, and it's bombed, and I'm nowhere to be found? Am I now suspect number one simply because I was planning on going there? These are things that we have to really adjudicate. We are the most tracked and data mined organization of people, if you will, most tracked and data mined society in basically the history, of humanity. That is a huge problem, but I think it also really behooves us and underscores here that anything that you do with Google is not private. If you are searching for something on Google, understand Google is retaining a copy of that, and you could be caught up in one of these searches. There are other browsers you can use. Startpage will return anonymous Google results. DuckDuckGo will do that as well. Also understand if you have a personal or private VPN, you might be routing your connection through a different state or even a different country, but because you are logged into Chrome with your Gmail account, that search, no matter where your computer says it is tied back to you. So in this case, don't expect a VPN to help you. These are important things to really understand. And if you're going to go start searching on these kinds of things, you've got to make sure that you're using search engines that are not essentially going to be friendly to these kinds of searches. So there you go. That's the information. It is absolutely, I think, terrible. Now, if this 17-year-old is guilty of, burning this house down and killing family, he obviously needs to go to jail. But the police need to do the footwork. They need to do the traditional investigation that has worked for hundreds and hundreds of years to essentially gather that evidence and not rely on simple Google searches because, again, intent is a hell of a thing. So that is your news of the day. Hopefully everybody here is going to maintain privacy, but no, it's probably not going to happen. I'm going to say it anyway. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please attempt to stay private. Thanks, everyone.